Welcome to Your Money, Your Mission, the podcast designed to turn complex financial situations into actionable advice, powered by Johnson Financial Group. I'm your host, Kelly Mould, and today we are going to dive into the monumental shift in wealth distribution anticipated over the next 5 to 10 years. This is to the tune of between $30 and $80 trillion, depending on what you're looking at. And over this next decade, we're going to try to spotlight what it means for those that will be inheriting or receiving some of this wealth and how best to manage that. To help me with this, my guests are Senior Vice President, Wealth Fiduciary Advisor Anne Tidmore, and Vice President, Private Banking Manager Meg Marciniak. Thank you both for being here today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I know, this is awesome. Thank you.
This is going to be a great discussion. So, Anne, I'm going to start with you. So you've been in this industry for quite a while, and you and I have had many conversations about this anticipated transfer of wealth, especially as we're both engaged in advising clients. And I know you've been talking about this phenomena, but some people may not know what this means. What is this? Can you give us a little background on this precedent that we're about to see happen?
Absolutely. So I think it's interesting to take a step back and think about baby boomers. And just think about the significant changes that generation has seen in their lifetime. Mm-hmm. The world has changed. Business has changed. Politics, trade, healthcare, technology, you name it. There's been a monumental shift forward. And one of the results of this is that baby boomers are now the wealthiest generation ever. Mm-hmm. So we have a really interesting dynamic. Like you said, we're expecting a huge asset transfer, and estimates range as high as $80 trillion over the next 2 years that's going to transfer to the next generation. Millennials, which is my generation, about 55% of millennials are expected to receive an inheritance over the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. So it's significant. Another twist to this is that about 70% of those wealth transfers are going to occur to women. Mm-hmm. In just the next 5 years, we expect women to be in control of roughly $30 trillion in financial assets. So this is a really significant time period. And it creates sort of a unique dynamic.
Right. And Anne, the transfer to women in particular, it's not necessarily because women are the favorite, right?
No.
There's some reasons why women are anticipated to inherit this, right?
Absolutely. And one of the main reasons is that women live longer.
Right.
Women tend to live on average 12 years longer than men.
Okay.
So they're working longer, they're accumulating more assets, and they just happen to be around to ultimately take over the family finances if a spouse is to pass away, or they're left standing when their parents pass away. So it's not that they're the favorite, it's just that they tend to be around longer. And it creates a really unique dynamic. A lot of women, over the course of my career, I've seen more women become involved mm-hmm. in their family finances. But I think that listeners would be really surprised, as I often am, that many women clients are still in the dark when it comes to their finances.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that in partnerships, it's very common for people to divide responsibilities.
Absolutely.
And in my relationship, I handle the money, but he handles a lot of the other stuff, right?
Absolutely.
And it's perfectly fine to divide and conquer what you need to do in a family. But I think the message, certainly the one that I give my adult children, is you can divide it. That's usually what you have to do to get everything done, but you have to communicate. People have to know where things are, what things are going on, especially financially, because should the worst happen, you have to be prepared to understand where you're at and how you can protect your family.
That's absolutely true. And I think it's also important to not only know, but to try to understand it so that you're not afraid of it.
Right.
And that you can gain some confidence. So then when you are ultimately on your own in managing the finance, you have a little bit of history with it. It's not so scary. It's not so intimidating. So I think it's important, and we're doing what we can here at Johnson Financial Group to try to educate women more, but I think there's more to do and more we can focus on.
Sure. And Meg, I know in your role in as a private banker that you often help people kind of navigate their financial situation and understand what services they can have. Have you observed anything in your experience about, let's start with women, but in general about how people are thinking about money and how they think about potentially their planning?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, my most important role on the private banking side is really sitting down with the clients and getting to know them and really understanding, where does debt fall in the great scheme of things? Where does income fall? What does your budget look like? And then from there, gathering the information that really pertains more to Anne's side on the investment piece to say, where does this all fit together? Because I think, clients, whether we're talking about wealthy clients or, I think there's this misconception too that someone has to be wealthy to have an advisor, to have a team that they work with. And where my role really comes into play is getting to know them right out of the gate. What does every day look like? And then we take it from there and do a more comprehensive planning piece. And especially to Anne's point, we work together on a lot of clients. And it's true, women are becoming more of the CFO role in their family. And with this influx of wealth, literal trillions over the next 2 decades, it's that whole shift that's all going to shift and change in terms of how I work with those clients.
Right. I think that it's important to point out, too, that in your efforts, you really try to identify the values and what's important to them. And we know that not everything doesn't have the same importance from one person to the next. And with women, I know some of the research has shown that they often prioritize security, longevity planning, and to really know someone who is understanding their values, their hopes, their dreams, the things that are really core to what they want to have happen in their immediate and long-term future. Would you agree with that?
Totally. And it's not taking for granted how much experience people have with money. And that goes for every client. Some clients, to Anne's point, we work with them and there's always one spouse who always sorts kind of out of the loop when it comes to knowing where everything is. And we're way past the ages of telling somebody in the family to say, there's a box in the closet. When I die, you'll find it. And that will tell you everything you need to know.
That is a really interesting point. One of the things that has always concerned me, and I know you both have probably had this experience, is the hesitation people have with talking to their children, or even their children talking to their parents about what happens when I'm gone. I know that my daughter in particular has refused for years to have that conversation with me, despite my efforts, which I find ironic because she is not, of all the children, she is not the nicest to me. So this is a great shock to me that she doesn't want to have that conversation. But more and more, I know we are encouraging our clients to have that conversation. And I think particularly with baby boomers, Anne, there has been such a tradition to not speak about money.
Absolutely.
And one of the things I think clients find comforting is you can start to have those conversations without revealing your most personal details. How do you facilitate that conversation or encourage clients to start bridging that gap and having that communication?
You're absolutely spot on. And it's the differences in the generations when it comes to money it's profound. Baby boomers, like you said, generally don't want to talk about it. And their objective has always been save, build up a pile of money, and then at the end, give it to my kids. And there's no discussion to be had. And what I try to explain to my clients is that if you take that approach, you're kind of playing with fire. You could end up with people who have hurt feelings. It can impact family unity. There can be fights about it because people don't understand why you made the decision that you made. And so it's very important that if you want to preserve family unity, keep families together even after you're gone. It's important that you have those conversations now.
Right.
And it's also important if you want your values about money to be passed down to the next generation. Now, it's unrealistic to think that anybody can dictate how the money is going to be spent once it's transferred. That's just not realistic. But I think it's entirely reasonable to try to pass along a sense of values when it comes to money. And that's really about creating legacy. And if you want to create a family legacy with respect to your money, you need to talk about those values. And those values could be anything. It could be charitable giving. It could be the importance of education and paying for education. Maybe it's paying for a family property that's important. Everyone's legacy and everyone's set of values are different. And the only way that you can ensure that those values are going to be passed along is to have those conversations up front. And like you said, and I agree, it doesn't necessarily mean divulging every detail.
Right.
It's
right.
more of a global value system that you want to pass along.
Right. And it's interesting, and share with me if you've had this experience. The majority of our wealthy clients who have some substantial gifts to send to these next generations or to bequest to them, in most cases, this hasn't been, inherited and they were just the luck of the draw and generations of wealth. That's the rare circumstance.
That's rare.
Most of these people were salt of the earth, worked really hard, as you pointed out, experienced lots of stuff in that baby boomer generation, a lot of really difficult times. And they worked hard and they amassed a lot of wealth that now is important. And their values and how they got this means that they want it to continue to benefit their family, right? Create this legacy that in many cases they never thought they would have.
That's exactly right.
But the generations have different values, right?
Oh, yes.
So what do you see are some of the differences in how the younger generation versus, believe it or not, I get to be a baby boomer. This is so interesting. My mother was born in the first year of the baby boomer. I was born in the last year of the baby boomer. So my mother and I are in the same generation.
Wow.
I know, odd, right? But very different. So how do you view younger generations and how they look at money and how they look at their legacy savings, their parents? What do you see that's different?
From the clients that we work with, what I'm noticing a pattern of is our younger clients are really focused on technology and how they can easily access, whether it be a website. They're very interested in being involved in the decision-making process when it comes to what they're investing in. They really want to be a part of the conversation and really feel like not so much that we're guiding them through this process, but more we're sort of facilitating what they want for their future more than anything. And when we look at the other side of the coin, to your point, when we're talking about baby boomers, what we're really facing is getting more involved from the banker and from the advisor role. And that's to say, we don't want to be involved when catastrophe hits. We want to be a part of the process all along. So when something happens, it's like pushing the easy button. It's like saying, we already know what to do, and so does the client.
And Anne, I know you have had circumstances where you've had multiple generations at the table.
Yes.
Conducted essentially what we call at Johnson Financial Group the family meeting.
Yes.
Tell me how you manage the different values between multiple generations and how you work through that.
That's always a slippery slope that you're trying to manage because, like I said earlier, baby boomers are about saving, and home ownership and very conservative values. As you get down to millennials, they're the credit card generation. They're comfortable taking on debt, and they're often very stressed about the multiple responsibilities they have. Generation X, they're looking for experiences. They're looking for travel, and they spend their money in a way that creates, again, the experience as opposed to the thing. So very, very different. But there are certain core values that you can try to grab the family around. There are core values that can tie the generations together. And like I said earlier, it could be something along the lines of charitable giving. It could be about educating the next generation. It could be about passing along dollars to the subsequent generations. It could be a family property. It depends, but you need to find that common core. And you need to find that common value that you can tie the generations together.
Right. I think you bring up a great point. I just conducted a similar meeting myself with, I think I had 3 generations at the table. And what was so inspiring to me is when Grandma and Grandpa talked about how important their community was and how charitable giving to the community was still an important thing they wanted to do. The way that the other generations rallied around that as an important part of the legacy was just inspiring. And the fact that Grandma and Grandpa were also concerned about grandchildren and great-grandchildren,
Absolutely.
right? They want to still continue to help move that forward. And so to your exact point, there is this alignment they have that is, they can be different, and yet the things that are at their core of a family were still really important. And having that communication around the table allowed everybody to be very clear on what was important.
Absolutely. And I think there's something else that there's a little bit of a shift, or something that I've seen that's changed in my experience in the industry, and it's the concept of giving while living. We're seeing more and more, even baby boomers who surprise me, that aren't necessarily trying to just save up everything and then give it away at the end, but rather they're trying to help their families achieve certain goals of objectives now. They're remodeling houses. They're paying for college educations. They're doing things to help them now. When you receive a gift is almost as important as how much you receive.
Right.
And timing is very important. And so this concept of, again, giving while living is becoming more prevalent, and helping our clients navigate through that, and how that features and how that factors into their overall financial plan is very important. That's one of the biggest values that we bring to the table. We can give someone comfort saying, you know what, you can help your kids today and you still can meet your long-term financial goals.
Right.
And that comfort that we can bring to our clients, it's just invaluable.
Right, especially having the partnership with the bank side and the wealth investment and the estate planning, all of that tied together so they can have a great sense of security in what they're doing. It's interesting you bring that up, because I was a trustee for a client, and she was an adorable lady. She sadly just passed a couple of weeks ago. But prior to that, she and I would meet regularly, and she had this fantastically gorgeous set of pearls that she had told me was to go to her daughter-in-law, who she loved dearly and wanted to make sure she had that. But she kept it in the safety deposit box. And I would ask her, well, do you ever wear it? And she'd say, oh my gosh, no, it's too expensive. And I'm like, well, it's insured, right? She'd go, oh yeah, but I could never wear it. And I said, well, then why don't you want to give it to her now? Right. You have the joy of that.
Seeing her wear it.
That gift and seeing it. And so, that was rather freeing to her. And as much as, it's always touching to disperse that, if you can gift and have the capacity to do that while you're alive, it is so much more meaningful to see the impact of those gifts.
Absolutely. And you can be more involved in the passing of the values and the establishment of the legacy if you're still alive. So I think that this is a wonderful shift that we're seeing. And I think it's coming out of the fact that people are living longer. I see my own father, who finally realizes that he's not going to outlive his money. And he's just giving money to the grandkids because for the first time in his life, he realizes that he's going to be okay. And I think that's a really interesting shift and a really interesting dynamic. And as an advisor, it's very fulfilling to be part of that.
Absolutely.
To see that shift.
And Meg, you brought up something really important, and you talked about this desire for especially younger generations to have more accessibility to technology. It's a DIY generation, right? Like we do it ourselves, and that's important. It's valuable, and things are changing, and they should maximize the use of that. However, right, we have our baby boomers that still want that in-person contact. And I have found that younger generations, when they want a person, they want a person, right? It doesn't solve every problem. What's your experience with that?
I mean, and that, it's becoming more popular, I think, across all generations, that they want to be more self-help in terms of being more technologically involved in what they're doing. They want to have that control. They want to have the access to going online and checking their balances and not being as dependent on, an advisor to necessarily know what's going on in their portfolio or with their banking or anything like that. That said, I mean, as we mentioned earlier, all that can still be accessible, but that's not going to be helpful, and that's not going to be there when something bad happens, or that's not going to be there to say, hey, I want to travel every year and I want a budget of $10,000 and I need this and I have these dreams and I want to have kids, I want to buy a house. The website's not going to do that for you. And that's where we really come in, and we can sit down and really do a comprehensive look and conversation around what these clients really want. And I think it's, that sort of relationship between the two, to your point, having technology versus also having a human you have access to. I don't think that's going anywhere.
Right. There's the facts, and then there's understanding what's really important to clients so that you make sure things are working in the way that they really want, right? That's what's so critical.
And I think it's also important, this would not be a Johnson Financial Group podcast if we didn't talk about how fraud is so much easier if you're not talking to a real person.
Oh,
and how
100%.
important it is to establish a relationship with a human who understands you and, more importantly, understands your patterns and knows when something just doesn't quite feel right. And the website and the robo-advisors simply don't have the capacity to do that. So it's so important to establish that relationship with your advisor so that they can identify something that just doesn't pass the smell test.
Yes, and this is, I know this is not unique to you because a lot of the Johnson Financial Group colleagues that we have do a lot of volunteer work, but I know that you two have a special place in your heart for financial literacy,
Yes.
Not just for women, but across the board, and particularly for young people, so that
Absolutely.
they start out at the very beginnings of their careers with some really solid information. I think that's a critical point. Would you say that's an important thing for you to constantly be in front of clients and their children and potentially grandchildren with? Is that something you do?
Absolutely.
board?
It's important to be prepared for an inheritance logistically, right? Where are the accounts? Where are the passwords? That's one thing. It's also important to be prepared emotionally and to understand what the inheritance means and how you can optimize it. I have situations where the kids were in the complete dark and they've received an inheritance, and I watch them burn through it. And it's frustrating to me because I knew the parents and I knew what the parents wanted. I knew their objectives, I knew their values, and it was never discussed with the children. And that's a very unfortunate situation. I also see that when people inherit a large sum of money, they freeze up because, again, they're intimidated by it. They don't understand it. They don't know what to do with it, and it's difficult for them to make decisions. There's
and they may be going through one of the most emotional times of their life.
Exactly.
You know?
Last thing that they need to do is to be making decisions about who their advisor is and how they want to invest. They don't want to make investment decisions. They're dealing with selling their parents' house. So there's a lot of pieces to it that need to be considered.
So do you find that working with a family and then offering to continue to work with the adult children is helpful in bridging that communication gap and ensuring all of that happens?
Absolutely. I go as far as to say, if your kids have a job and they have a 401k, let me hop on the phone with them. And let's talk about what that 401k means. And let's look at the investment options. And let's talk about how you can invest and why you invest. And just starting with the basics and building the relationship from that point forward. Next, those kids might call me if they're looking to buy a house, and I can bring Megan and we can look at different financing things. If they want to provide a private education for their kids or pay for college, we help them with those decisions. So it's starting small. But
those are big life decisions.
Big decisions.
Right?
Yep.
And then having a team you're familiar with has to help navigate that much easier and reduce some of the stress inherent with those big life decisions.
Absolutely. I always say I think that some of the greatest value that we add is during times of transition. And it could be good transition, it could be bad transition, but it's during those transition periods that having a relationship with us is really important. It's just one less thing for you to think about.
Yes, technology is good, but it doesn't replace us.
No, it does not.
What trends have you seen in your time in this industry that are important for us to recognize today?
Sure. Much like the baby boomers, I've seen a lot of change in my history in the industry. And I think one of the more profound changes is that early on, all we talked about was investment performance. Client meetings were spent talking about the economy and holdings and performance and benchmarks, and that's all still very important, but it's not the sole focus any longer. We really view the investment performance as the fuel that drives the engine of the financial plan. And the financial plan is really the focus of our conversation with our clients, getting to understand them and what they're seeking to achieve in their lifetime and what type of legacy they're looking to have in place when they're no longer here.
Yeah, that's the only way to understand if there's alignment between that investment strategy and their estate planning, for that matter, right?
Absolutely, and I think it aligns with the differences in the generations, where the baby boomers, particularly on the older side of the baby boomers, were simply interested in amassing more. So all they were really interested was investment performance, where now we're looking to achieve specific goals, to embrace certain values, and to pass certain things along to the next generation. So the plan becomes much more important and much more of a focal point in our discussion with clients.
And we have so many more tools now that make that
Absolutely.
easy to do and easy to analyze.
Absolutely. The financial planning software that's been made available to us in the past couple of years is unbelievable.
Right.
And at Johnson Financial Group, we have an entire team of planners that supports me in putting those together for our clients.
Right. That's great. So Meg, it's interesting that some people think that they don't need to really engage a team until they've amassed some wealth. So when should someone start talking to a financial advisor, a banker? When is that the appropriate thing to do?
I mean, in my opinion, the earlier the better. I think there's a huge misconception that you shouldn't be meeting with an advisor or banker until you've, like, to your point, amassed this amount of wealth. I think getting to that wealth and having an advisor, there's a huge connection there. And I think that whether we're meeting in the stage of you getting your first job, buying your first house, getting married, having kids, retiring, and then furthermore, moving that wealth on to the next generation, there really is no too soon, in my opinion.
Right. I certainly wish I had engaged with a banker at my first job, but I learned the hard way. So, what final tips would you have for someone who may be trying to figure out how to navigate this with their families, have that conversation, or even if it was somebody who said, oh, I think I'm going to be on the receiving end of some of this and I want to be well prepared and respect that legacy. What kinds of things should people be thinking about, Meg?
You know, I think the biggest thing is just the importance and weight of working with an advisor and a banker and having a team. You know, whether or not every client's going to feel comfortable sharing, you know, their finances with their family. And that's fine, but then that's what we'll do, right? We'll guide them through that process and we'll make sure that when something happens that we're helping the family.
Okay.
Seek to educate yourself and look for opportunities to learn. I think as an industry, we've done a good job of providing financial education to our clients. I think we can do more in terms of providing specialized financial education to women. Women absorb and digest information differently than men, and they have different needs and they have different objectives. So look for opportunities to mix with other women who are in a similar situation, have similar opportunities and life experiences, and find ways to educate yourself.
And whether male or female, starting younger with financial literacy.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
100%.
you know, I am so delighted to see so many states now requiring financial literacy courses at the high school level, something that certainly never was offered when I was in high school 1,000 years ago.
Yes.
But so important. And then if that's not available, or to be able to work with an advisor and say, hey, what can you do for my adult children as well to make sure that they're prepared? I think it's really a reasonable thing to ask.
It's so important. I mean, my kids grumble because I made them open Roth IRAs, right? They didn't want to put their $500 in there. They wanted to do something fun. But I put the map out there and explained to them what that would mean to them long term, and now they're on board. So yes, starting early, educating yourself, educating your children. You know, reach out to us. We're here to help. This is what we do and what we really enjoy.
Thank you both for being here. This has been really informative. I appreciate your time. And thanks to all of you for joining us. Make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes of Your Money, Your Mission, the podcast designed to turn complex financial situations into actionable advice, powered by Johnson Financial Group.
This podcast is not a recommendation to buy or sell any investment or financial product. Whether a particular investment or financial solution is right for you depends on the facts of your particular situation. Please consult your own professional advisors prior to taking any action based on the content of this podcast. Wealth management services are provided through Johnson Bank and Johnson Wealth Inc., Johnson Financial Group companies. Additional information about Johnson Wealth Inc., a registered investment advisor, and its investment advisor representatives is available at advisorinfo.sec.gov. Not FDIC insured, or not deposits may lose value.